So I want to talk about this fair game that I keep on mentioning in other videos. And the fair game is just that. How do we make linking OKRs to compensation fair for both the organization and the employee? This isn't just about OKRs. This is the rules for any compensation system. Let's take a look at them. Thing number one is you need to make sure the game is winnable. And by winnable, I mean, let's make sure that we set targets which are achievable, right? Some of these stretch targets are so far beyond the realm of the possible that they're just demotivational. And secondly, we need to agree on how performance is interpreted. So let's talk about this for a second. Let's imagine it's an OKR system. I have my 4 quarters and I'm going to set some targets. I think there are 3 major target categories to think about. One is most probable. So most probable is what John Doerr calls committed, or what you'd normally think of as your budget, what you'd say to the board of directors, to investors and so forth. And that is the number that you're pretty confident you can achieve. There's a number slightly higher than that. I'm going to call that best possible. Best possible is what happens if everything goes in your favor. The best example I can think of is driving to work. Let's say the average drive to work for you takes an hour. That's in rush hour. The best possible might be 20 minutes, but that's at 2 o'clock in the morning. But what's important about best possible is both you and I would calculate the same number. And secondly, I can do so with the assets you've given me, my car, and the competencies I have, my ability to drive. So best possible is achievable, but I need to be creative about how to achieve that number. So in my example of driving to the office, I could do better than an hour by doing Zoom meetings until rush hour is over. I could leave and go to the office at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's not going to be 20 minutes, but nor is it going to be an hour, etc. So best possible to me is a more compelling target. And then the third one is what John Doerr calls aspirational. Now, again, my dilemma with aspirational is your aspirational is going to be different than mine. So if my employees have an easier job of achieving their aspirational goal than yours, you might be looking for 1,000% improvement, and I'm looking for a 10% improvement. So it's no longer a fair game. Now, if we extend these out across the year, obviously by the end of the year, there's a substantial difference between these 3. Now, this might be exaggerated, but it's for a learning moment, right? So again, I feel this is unfair because someone made up this number and people might not even become close. And because it's just a made up number, it can actually be demotivational. Now, how we score this is relatively similar. So for example, for most probable, this performance level is red, whether in fact my target is most probable, best possible, or aspirational. Red is still where it is you need external help to help you succeed. Amber or yellow is, a band below that. Yellow to me means I'm behind target, but I can make it with the resources you've given me. And then green, I'm on target. Now, in this world, there'd actually be 2 greens, green for most probable, maybe a second green for best possible, and even a third green for that aspirational. But the scoring is consistent no matter what target I'm presenting. Now, the concept here is it's possible that an objective or key result might actually have 2 targets. So wouldn't it be interesting if I could say my most probable sales target, my committed sales target is 10 million. Best possible is 20 million. Now, what's interesting about that is people learn that that is an element that I might want to stretch for to get the 20 million number. There are other targets I don't want you to stretch for. My simple example is at McDonald's, we learned that you'll just tolerate 3 minutes in the drive-thru. There's no benefit in making it 2 minutes because you can't tell the difference. And at 4 minutes, you're mad. So I don't want a stretch target. I want you to hit 3 minutes. So some have only the most probable number. Some might have both most probable and best possible. And you can choose if you want to use aspirational. Anyways, that's my point about the fair game. And the idea is if it's possible to help people perform harder, the idea is that I can move towards that higher performance, higher than most probable. There's no research to back that up, by the way. I've been looking extensively. There's no business research to say stretch goals actually make people work harder and they actually get better performance. That may come. It doesn't exist currently. So back to my list. So the fair game rules also include, make sure that they're simple rules and that they're clear, that they're documented, everyone understands, because there's nothing worse than getting partway through a year and find the rules get changed, or they're too complicated and therefore they're not motivational. 3, make sure that your compensation model or reward model has a mix of individual and team or teams linkages. So you might have one metric that's related to you as an individual, a second one for the team you work on, a third one for the group that you're in, a fourth one for the department you're in, and even a fifth one for the team called the overall organization. So part of this is some of those are directly controllable, and those are better for motivating performance, but others are encourage me to work as a team. So those are the team-based OKRs. So you need to have a mix, because very seldom do we have organizations where we want people to play as solo players. So that leads us to the next one. We need a certain level of transparency and a certain level of frequency in the reporting. So transparency is this. I need to know what other teams are hoping to do and how they're achieving it. Because if they're not achieving their targets, it has an impact on me. Either I need to up my game or throttle back to meet when they're going to be ready. And the frequency. The frequency is, imagine I only know how I'm performing at the end of the year. I mean, that would be like going to school and only getting one report at the end of the term. Like, you'd never succeed. I need that ongoing reporting. So, we're moving towards continuous performance feedback. And with OKRs, of course, that's what we get. And those continuous performance feedback needs to be linked to continuous performance conversations. This conversation between you and your upline so that you can agree on what's happening and what does that look like. So there are other rules to compensation systems that I'm not touching on here. So for example, in a good compensation system, your numbers need to be auditable. In other words, someone from the outside needs to be able to validate the numbers. If it's your impression versus the worker's impression, it's not going to work out well. There's other situations where we might want to make sure that the number typically is a lagging measure. In other words, there's hard evidence about it occurring as opposed to a leading measure, which is hoping it's going to get stuff in the future. So there's other good compensation models that you need to add into these fair game guidelines.